the idea is that you hopefully have a plan and it's kind of thoughtful in that you're spending money in ways that help you achieve your goals.
April is National Financial Literacy Month, and a K-State Research and Extension Family Resource Management Specialist says having a budget and a plan for how we spend our money helps put us in control of our finances. On today's Sound Living, strategies for achieving financial goals. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Elizabeth Kish says that Extension has a variety of publications and fact sheets to help people develop a budget and to plan for immediate, intermediate, and long-term goals. She says that getting started is often the hardest part of managing our finances because we think we need to save a lot and that we need to do it right away.
But when it comes to finances, as with so many things, small steps really can make a difference over time.
This is kind of that marathon type thing. It's a long process.
Right. It is a long process. And a marathon or just a distance race, maybe, if we want to think in those terms.
When it comes to getting started, what are some things that we should think about? I know that we're kind of thinking save for certain things like an emergency fund so that you have money available, but it doesn't have to be $100 a month. It's really whatever you can afford.
Right. It is what you can afford, although I would say everyone has a different definition of affordability. So if we think about the basics, and April's a great month to talk about this because many of us are doing our taxes, but the first thing, obviously, is to know what your income is. How much money do you actually have? And income isn't the only resource that you have to meet your financial goals, but it's one to think about to start with. So what is your overall income, and then what is your take-home pay? But when we think about take-home pay, that's also a little bit complicated because many of us have our health insurance taken off the top. We might have our retirement savings taken off the top. We may even have some of our giving taken off the top if we give to United Way or other automatic deductions in that way. So what we have left is what we often have to spend and to save and invest. But we also don't want to lose sight of the fact that maybe some of those expenses have already come off the top. So at a base, know what your income is, and then start thinking about where do you spend your money? Because when to get ahead, you have to spend less than you earn or spend less than you have and do something with the rest to meet your goals.
And that can get complicated because we often forget about some of the expenses we have. So you really almost need to, I hate to say spreadsheet, but in a way you have to write this down somewhere so that you know that you've got everything that you're spending money on included in that budget.
Right. And so you use the budget word. First you said spreadsheet. But yes. And it doesn't have to be formal. Again, this is where I think people get tripped up or they perceive a barrier because they think it needs to be a very formal budget. It can actually be a very informal budget, a piece of notebook paper or just a piece of printer paper, and just think about what are the expenses that you have every month, and then what are the expenses that you have periodically throughout the year, maybe car insurance, maybe some other insurances, your licensing fees for your car, those kind of things are sort of periodic expenses. And then the occasional expenses, which would be gifts or holidays, vacation, back to school. And think about what are those categories and then try to figure out how much are you actually spending. And if you see that you are actually spending more than you earn, that means you're either taking money from savings or you're probably using credit. And sometimes in a short run, maybe that's what we need to do. In the long run, that's probably not sustainable.
And sometimes we underestimate. I know a lot of times someone will say, how much do you spend per month on groceries? And I'm like, $100 a week, but I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Right. We do tend to some people probably underestimate, some people probably overestimate. It depends what our personalities are. But the thing about groceries is when we talk about groceries, when we go to a grocery store or a big box store that also sells groceries, we're probably buying other things that might be more technically called household supplies. And so it's kind of hard to separate the actual food groceries from the household supplies running of the household, which in the end maybe doesn't really matter because it's all part of your daily living. Again, don't get hung up on that.
And then we throw in eating out, and that also is another category.
Right. A lot of people have a category food away from home. That could be lunches if you work and you eat out. It can also be just your entertainment, your fun money. And none of these things are inherently bad. Let's be clear about that. The idea is that you hopefully have a plan and it's kind of thoughtful in that you're spending money in ways that help you achieve your goals.
Bottom line, we're knowing how much money is coming in and through this process, how much is going out, and then what is left over is really the money that we can start doing other things with. Saving for a down payment on a house or a car, just building up that emergency fund. That's money that we can use in other ways.
Right. Or retirement, sending a child to college, all of those things. There's a couple different ways of thinking about that. We might talk about what's left over. Truly, though, in financial planning, everything is planned, so there's really not a lot left over. You might have some sort of miscellaneous spending, but hopefully it's less than 10% of your total spending. So even those things, hopefully you have a plan. And many people have probably heard the phrase "pay yourself first," and that refers to once you know how much you want to save, what your savings goal or your investment goal is to take it off the top. And that's why for a lot of people who have employer-sponsored retirement plans, we don't even see that money directly. I mean, we see it in the number, but then it's not in our net pay.
Speaking of that, for someone who doesn't have that on-the-job retirement account, how can someone open up an account? Because that's probably one of the better ways to really grow your money. And it's something that you can build over time, that you can start when you're younger, and it'll continue to grow as you age.
Right. So if you're starting out with saving and investing for longer term, the priority would be to have an emergency fund, but then to start putting small amounts aside on a regular basis for these longer term goals, retirement. And you might initially start in an account at your financial institution. It might not earn such a huge return, but in order to get like the minimum amount that you would need to start an investment account. And then you would start something more as an investment account and keep on making these small regular contributions. And where would you find that? I mean, your financial institution is a great place to start. After that, there is actually an online extension course called Investing for Your Future, which would be a great place to, if you're not comfortable, to sort of work through at your own pace and then do your homework and figure out, where you would want to invest.
I know one of the things we always talk about is the Kansas Saves, the America Saves program, and that's something that is probably the easiest way to start because it has a lot of basics and a lot of good information.
Right. And the great thing about Kansas Saves, which is part of America Saves, is that you pledge to save or you pledge to pay down debt and you make this commitment to yourself. So that's the behavioral component of it. You've made a commitment. It doesn't mean, you might skip a month or whatever your goal is, but you've made the commitment and then they can help provide the motivation.
I think one of the things you're touching on here is the fact that we need to make this a habit. So is this something that we can be, as a parent, is this something that we can be teaching our kids? Do we start early and put that in their mind that, when you set some money aside, you see it grow little by little by little, and it's something that becomes a habit and something that they're used to doing?
That's right. And I would say, parents make deliberate choices about what they teach their children, but they also are teaching their children and they don't even know it. So especially when it comes to money, children are absorbing, they're watching, they're sponges, right? And so it doesn't necessarily maybe even involve a conversation because they're watching what you do. And if they see you in the way you spend, for example, if you use a lot of cash, they'll see that. If you use a lot of cards, and it could be that you're actually spending cash, but they don't understand necessarily the difference. So then a conversation could be good. Nowadays, with so many online transactions, they might not actually see you transfer the money into savings. So in that case, maybe putting something on, the refrigerator, especially if you're thinking about a family goal, and vacation sometimes comes to mind, or holiday spending is, okay, well, we're transferring this amount of money every month. We're going to make a little thermometer chart or a bar chart on the refrigerator, and we're going to color it in every month when we've put it, and we're going to watch it grow.
Do we find that talking about money is still a difficult subject for a lot of people?
Oh, I think so. It's a little bit hard for me to gauge since I obviously talk about it a lot, and I don't have problems talking about it. But yes, I do believe it is a difficult conversation for a lot of people, and particularly among families, and then intergenerationally, it can be difficult.
One of the things you mentioned to me early on was the fact that weddings is something that is becoming a conversation or should be a conversation.
Well, and I think wedding expenses and wedding planning, what are our expectations and what sort of wedding? It is a big business for the people who are selling these products and services, and it can be a big expense for the couple and or their families. And that, again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. What we need to think about is this is one day. I mean, this is my bias. It's one day. It's not your whole marriage. And so what is the minimum that you want? What are the nice things? What is the really splurge? And maybe think about it in that way. But these are conversations to have. And, not only is this a conversation between the two people who are getting married, but often the families and the extended families are involved with that. And that's sometimes where the challenges can come in. The two people who are getting married might be completely in agreement, but then the parents or the family members get involved, and that's where things can get tricky. And it's hard, especially, first marriages tend to happen when we're younger. We're not completely formed as adults necessarily. We don't have a lot of life experience, and we also don't have a lot of experience standing up for ourselves maybe and what we want.
This kind of comes back to what we talk about sometimes between wants and needs, something that we have to have or something that we just like to have.
Right. So going back to sort of circling where we started, once you know what your income is and once you know what you're currently spending your money on, then you can sort of think about, okay, how am I spending my money and how much are we spending on what we need? And is it a true need, or is some of this sort of bleeding over into the want category, which again is fine. My mantra about all of this is just be thoughtful and deliberate, think through your choices. And it can make sense. If it fits within your plan, if it fits your values and your goals, then go for it.
And then continue to update that plan as you have some life changes?
Right. So our circumstances change. And also there's just sometimes a creep in our spending. We get comfortable spending at a certain level and then it just creeps up. Or sometimes, you might notice like utilities sort of start to go up or go down. It doesn't happen often, but that's a time to revise what you're thinking. And it also might be, if you think about insurance, maybe it's time to get an insurance checkup to see are there ways you can decrease the cost of your insurance. Maybe you want to look at a different provider. It depends where you feel like your spending is out of whack.
But start with how much you're actually making and how much you're actually spending.
That's right. Because really, those are things you can control. And part of it, the actual spending, that's a daily thing, right? I mean, some people, I hardly spend any money during the week. But then I go out on the weekend and I just chunk all my errands and all my spending. So it feels like I'm spending a lot of money, but it's planned. I mean, that's when I do my spending, is on the weekends. And I have all my errands done and I'm good.
And again, taking that time to really understand where you stand financially will probably ease some stress, may create some initial stress when you realize maybe where some of your money is going, but at the same time, it can reduce stress.
It can reduce stress. I do think we need to be clear, though, that if you're operating at a very low income level, you probably already know where your money goes. You probably do all of this, and that won't necessarily relieve the stress. And so the other sort of concept to think about is what can change in the short run and then what can change in the longer run. And so in the short run, we can make changes in sort of how much we spend on groceries. Maybe we can make changes in our utility bills. But it takes a little bit longer to, for example, change our transportation costs or change our housing costs. It can be done, but it takes a little bit longer. So it's not an immediate fix. And so that's important to keep in mind, too.
That's K-State Research and Extension Family Resource Management Specialist Elizabeth Kish. To find money management publications produced by K-State Research and Extension, visit www.bookstore.ksre.ksu.edu. Select Home and Family from the menu on the left, and then select Household Management from the menu on the right. You can also pick up publications at all county and district extension offices. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.